always do as we start. Tonight's guest will be a departure from the last few interviews that we've had, as we have been more on the time travel kick. Hold on a second. Brave warrior, there was a mistaken description of one of the event's quests that might have led you to spend Winterfest coins without getting a proper reward. This problem is solved now, and we apologize for your inconvenience. Please accept these Ascension resources and continue your journey in Dominion. This will be available till January 6th, 2 a.m. UTC. And the thing is, those are items that, due to me having the lower Ascension ticket, I never would have got to see. So, okay, thank you, Dominion. Alright, getting back to what I was talking about for Mr. Bell, Midnight in the Desert tonight will not be a time traveling romp in the park. Tonight's guest from December 8th, 2015 will be Dr. David Jacobs, and his commentation will be on alien experimentation on humans. This also has a very distinct situation of being Art Bell's last regularly scheduled Midnight in the Desert episode that he ever produced. I believe he did go, and I think I have a few other tapes beyond this of when he did one-offs later. But this would be the last time that he actually did a normal episode from a 5-day-a-week type procedure. So let's hit the proverbial event bag just to see if there's anything there. Holiday every day. Like it just holds the Wishmaster ticket. And I believe that's still holding because of the eggs. Yep. So without further ado, as we get started on this cold winter's night in Dominion, the last regularly scheduled episode of Midnight in the Desert that ever went out with David Jacobs about alien experimentation.
From the high desert in the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever the case may be, wherever you are. In these 25 time zones, covered each like a blanket by this program, Midnight in the Desert. My name is Art Bell. Hi, everybody. Rules for the show, simple, sweet and simple. No bad language, and one call per show. I want to do my thank yous. Telos, who supplied all the good sound, and obviously they know what they're doing, right? Joe Talbot here in Pahrump. Keith, my webmaster. Heather Wade, my producer, who works herself to death. Stream Guys, LV.net. Sales, Pete Everhart. TuneIn Radio. News, Amy Martin, of course, and my beautiful wife, Erin, and, of course, my beautiful daughter Asia. 8 years old now. And seeming like an adult to me. Amazing, just amazing how quickly they grow. All right, so there are a couple of few things I want to talk to you about before we begin it. Dr. David Jacobs is coming on tonight for the third time for a very good reason on Midnight. I think he has made the most compelling case for abductions, and I'm afraid the most compelling case for an invasion of our planet. I know it sounds crazy. You just sit back and you listen. You'll figure it out. I do want to talk a little bit about this show. People apparently have the idea that all I do on this show is paranormal. And yes, I do a lot of it. But that is not all I do. And those of you who remember back to Coast probably remember most of the paranormal stuff I did, but I did a whale of a lot of other stuff. And if there's something going on in the world, I pay attention to it. It's as simple as that. I'm not running with blinders here. And so I do other things if I consider them to be really important, of mass interest. And, I understand that right now you're overloaded with the whole ISIS baloney. But when the homeland is threatened, when it's begun here, then it's newsworthy, and I do talk about the news. So those of you who have memories of Coast to Coast AM, I suggest they're slightly selective, as memories tend to be. We remember the things we want to remember. And so I've always done all sorts of things. I've had country music stars on, I've a million different things. It was not paranormal every night, mostly not political, though. I don't like politics. I guess you could consider ISIS politics, but I really don't. I just consider them a threat, like nuclear weapons or whatever. They're a threat. And also, so there is that. I mean, come on, folks. Remember back to Coast, the early years, and you'll know that I did a lot of different things, and I still will. If something comes along I think I need to cover it, I shall. Another thing, people last night thought I support Trump somehow. I think it's because I quoted something Don Lemon said on CNN. He was talking about the Trump statement to bar all the Muslims, and he said something like, he said, I think it's possible that millions of Americans, or many Americans, in their privacy of their own home, are agreeing with Trump. I was just quoting Don Lemon. I don't support Trump. Actually, I don't support anybody right now. I'm sort of disappointed with the whole field. Nobody jumps out at me. So, for those who might have been curious, that's me. I'm a libertarian. Right now, I don't find anybody that I get really excited about, period. So, the news, and I always do discuss it. And it begins with Trump again, of course. His call to block Muslims from entering the U.S. is being met with a chorus of near-universal condemnation across the country, around the globe. From the halls of Congress to 10 Downing Street, Trump's statement Monday, advocating a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the U.S., was blasted as bigoted, unconstitutional, and potentially dangerous for American interests abroad. Well, almost everything is dangerous for American interests abroad these days. Iran has tested a ballistic missile. They did it last month. We just find out tonight. This is the second such test since the summer's nuclear agreement. State Department said only that it was conducting a serious review of such reports. The test actually occurred November 21. According to the official, coming on top of an October 10th test Iran confirmed at the time. Officials said other undeclared tests occurred earlier than that, but he didn't elaborate. Just what they need is ballistic missiles, huh? To go with the nuclear weapons they don't have because of the agreement, right? Driven by the Paris terror attacks, the U.S. House voted overwhelmingly Tuesday to tighten controls on travel to the U.S. and require visas for anybody who's been in Iraq or Syria in the previous 5 years. So even the U.S. Congress is beginning to make moves, as they should. All right, so coming up in a moment, I think this is a very special show. David Michael Jacobs is a retired professor of history at Temple University in Philadelphia. He has also been a UFO researcher since 1980. 1966. In 73, he completed his doctoral dissertation in the field of intellectual history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America. This was only the second PhD degree granted with a dissertation involving UFO-related themes. He's written and delivered many articles, papers, and addresses on the subjects of UFOs and abductions, has been a consultant to the major UFO organizations from 1977 to 2011. He taught the country's only regular curriculum university course on UFOs and abductions, UFOs and American society. Since the early 90s, he has specialized in the UFO abduction phenomena and has investigated over 1,150 abductions with 150 different individuals. So come.
Again, mute just for the audio. Music tracks, so we don't get a copyright strike.
Exclusively on the Dark Matter Digital Network, this is Midnight in the Desert with your host, Art Bell. To call Art, please dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
That's it, all right. Okay, if you think you're ready, here comes Dr. David Jacobs. Doctor, welcome back to Midnight in the Desert.
Thank you for having me again, Art. I appreciate it.
You're here for a reason because I think more than anybody I've talked to, actually in my career, because I remember going back thinking what a breath of fresh air you were in the beginning, that you didn't think all these aliens were the friend of man and meant us no harm, and they were all warm and fuzzy types, and you're the only one who says no.
Yeah, actually, my colleague Bud Hopkins, who is one of the great pioneers in abduction research, felt the same way. And but people I just didn't hear that from people. It never materialized in anything I ever did, except once. It didn't exactly materialize, but a woman who I worked with, who was very, very, very much into the New Age world. So much so that it was difficult for me even to understand what she was talking about when she talked to me in just in sort of normal language. But she came twice. She came once, and then she wrote me a letter. Oh, let me just say, she had a standard abduction event. They took her out of. Actually, she's in the middle of New York City, and they did this to her and that to her and this to her and that to her, and then they put her back. And she wrote me a very angry letter saying that she did not remember what she wanted to remember. She had it in her mind that something else entirely different had happened. And she told me something completely different than she had in her mind. And she blamed it on me for asking questions like, what happens next?
Really? As though you should have all the answers, all of them.
I had all the answers, and I had obviously some sort of control over her, like Svengali and Trilby or whatever. And but in fact, that's not the way the kind of light relaxation induction I do. It's just relaxing people and getting them to feel very calm, and then asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that.
All right. Is there any doubt in your mind that abductions occur?
Well, no, there is not. There used to be many, many years ago when I didn't know enough about it. But the evidence is your basic sledgehammer between the eyes now. It is not subtle. It's people see other people being abducted and may not be abducted themselves. People are abducted in groups and can confirm each other's abduction.
Can you give me a couple of examples of that? Because people love proof of things, and what we're going to discuss tonight is pretty wild stuff. So, yeah, let's begin with a few cases.
Well, I'll talk generically.
Okay.
People are abducted in groups oftentimes. Now, lots of these are family groups. For example, here's two sisters. A sister lived on the grounds of the home that the other sister lived. The other sister was married. The other sister wasn't. And both of them are abductees because this is an intergenerational phenomenon. If a person is an abductee and has kids, then all the children will be abductees.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had this abduction, and one of them called the other one up in the morning and said, we were abducted last night, and I remember telling you that I was going to resist and not do anything they wanted me to do. And I remember you told me that I shouldn't resist because it never works that way, and it's different, and you can't just say no and that sort of thing. And the other sister said, yeah, I remember that. And then you said you were going to do it anyways, and I said no, just a waste of time. And then they took up this argument that they had on board the object in the next morning on the phone.
Do you know? Can you tell me without names where this occurred?
Well, I work with people who live within about 100-mile radius of me, so I can see them often rather than having to fly here or that sort of stuff.
And your location is?
Well, I'm in just outside of Philadelphia. I'm for all intents and purposes, in the Philadelphia area.
All right, good. You mentioned there are abductions in which witnesses actually see the person abducted or see the craft or both.
That does happen every once in a while. The most famous case of that was a book called Witnessed by Bud Hopkins, which was the Linda Corteil case. She's actually, after all these years, this happened in 1989, after all these years, she is actually starting to do some talking at UFO conferences. But not only did some people see her being abducted, but hundreds of people apparently saw her being abducted. It was a huge sighting. Traffic stopped on the Brooklyn Bridge, if you can imagine that.
I can.
And the one person who got in touch with Bud Hopkins, who had witnessed this, thought she was watching a Hollywood movie or something. And one of the interesting things she said is that while she was stopped there, she could hear people behind her in the cars behind her screaming. And Linda was taken right through her window, and with three small gray beings into a waiting UFO, all of which was visible. Now Bud thought that might have been a purposeful display, but I look at it more mundanely. I look at it as an error. The beings who are abductors are living, sentient beings. They are not perfect, and they make mistakes. And I think this was a mistake, actually. We will never know, but that's my guess at it.
Most certainly not the norm.
No, definitely not the norm. However, sometimes roommates will see other people being taken. Just a few seconds of it, but they can tell. One woman related to me a story about how she had no idea she was abducted or anything like that, but her roommate said, I had this bizarre dream. I dreamed I saw you coming down through the ceiling and into bed. And we just a session on that, because that was the oddest thing was it wasn't her memory, it was her roommate's memory. So that happens once in a while, and of course it happens with family all the time, and you have to remember also that people are physically missing from their normal environments. This is not some sort of astral plane type situation where the mind leaves the body and they travel somewhere. It's not like that at all. It's a physical event that happens in real time. It's not like they come back and it's only 10 minutes later and it feels like they've been on board for 4 hours. It's not like that. If they feel like they've been on board for 4 hours, they've been on board for 4 hours. And when they return, it's 4 hours later. They usually notice that or often notice it.
So linear time.
it's linear time, and not only that, but people sometimes are returned without their clothes on, and oftentimes if it's at night, it's with their pajamas not on. They're folded neatly on the foot of their bed, or they're on backwards, or they're wearing somebody else's clothes.
Oh, that's really weird. And that implies there are mass abductions, and so clothes occasionally get mixed up. I don't know.
Not perfect people. Exactly right. Yeah, not perfect aliens, I should say.
So in these cases where there have been witnesses, one would think that the New York Times, the big mass media, particularly with witnesses, if they stayed around to talk, would have printed this kind of thing up, right? I know that Bud Hopkins and yourself collect it, but why didn't it hit the mainstream?
Because it's totally insane. They're completely crazy.
Yeah.
You know, the New York Times used to publish UFO sightings every once in a while, and then the Philadelphia Inquirer used to publish UFO sightings. They virtually never published abductions, but they would publish UFO sightings, especially major ones seen by a lot of people and all that stuff. Major newspapers don't do that anymore. The only papers that do that are regional papers or small town papers. But major newspapers do not do that anymore. It's just old news.
Yeah, I don't quite get the mainstream press, Doctor. I recall the Phoenix Lights, and so interesting because I was actually on the air at the time. And, of course, we talked the hell out of it. We just talked and talked about the Phoenix Lights. It was such a gigantic sighting. So many thousands of people sighted these craft. And then I sort of got done with it. We wore it out. And then 2 months later, Doctor, the mainstream press suddenly had this, oh my God, Phoenix Lights. There've been craft over Phoenix. It's like somebody threw a switch, and the mainstream press suddenly got it and ran with it. It was so weird.
Yeah, and that was some time ago now. That was a
long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and every once in a while, a major event will happen, like the UFO sighted in Chicago at the airport at what's the name of the airport?
O'Hare.
At O'Hare Airport, or the sighting in Stephenville, Texas.
Yeah.
That sometimes will make the news, but it really is the exception that proves the rule. It's an awful situation. People have very few places to report it except for the UFO organizations. The United States government, the Air Force, or whatever, will not accept UFO reports from the public.
That's right.
They just refer them to local organizations, and they will accept UFO reports from their own pilots because they think maybe they're going to be an intruder of some sort, or Russians or whatever, and so. But other than that, the UFO phenomenon seems to have peaked in the 90s in terms of news attention and in terms of television attention, and picked up a little bit in the thousands when cable became huge, and the number of stations suddenly became in the hundreds, and they had to fill the time. And now it's sort of dying down again.
Yes.
But the interesting thing is that the UFO phenomenon is exactly the same as it always was. It's although sometimes people say that they see more triangular-shaped objects, larger objects than they used to in those days, but nothing has affected the UFO phenomenon itself. It is in no relation to the society or what the society thinks or the news media or television or anything like that.
Well, God knows we're shielded from our own news. So here's a question for you. Is the phenomenon just an American one, or is it worldwide?
It is a global phenomenon. The United States is not the mainstay of UFO sightings. It happens all around the world. as to abductions. It's a global phenomenon. My guess is that it started probably around the same time, maybe last quarter of the 19th century. But it might have started here first. They might have gotten here first and then spread out. I would doubt that. I would really, really doubt that. It doesn't seem to go back much further than the last quarter of the 19th century, and even then, it's problematic. So when people talk about ancient aliens and all that, the evidence for that is, well, it's between slim and none, and as they say, slim left town.
Yeah, some notes on rocks, pictograms on rocks, that kind of thing. They're a little suspicious, but beyond that.
And of course, in those days, people saw strange things in the sky every night of their lives, practically, because they didn't know what stars were, and they didn't know what meteors were, and they didn't know what this was and what that was.
All correct, yes. Here's something to think about. The animal mutilations, and in fact, the abduction of cows, pretty well documented. All of that stuff. Was that prior to the human abductions or concurrent with?
That we just don't know that, and it's probably going to be an unknowable unless they tell us in some way. The they being the occupants, as they used to be called years ago in UFO circles. So we don't really know. There have been documented cases of animal mutilations, but for what purpose, I can't imagine. I can see stealing a whole cow. I can see that, because then they would cut it up and make food for hybrids, which we can talk about later. Yeah. But to take just certain organs, it just doesn't make any sense.
No, they're all precision surgical cuts and all the rest of that. But what does make sense to me is that before you would begin doing whatever you're going to do, and we'll talk about that with human beings, you might take a look at what are considered to be lower life forms and look at some of the biology before you started in on the highest part of the chain.
How do you mean?
Us. In other words, you might want to take a look at a cow or a chicken or a cat or a dog or whatever before you begin looking at humans, the top of the chain. We think.
Yeah, but it's so hard to get them under hypnosis. You know what I mean? It's
yes. Well said. But you get my point, right?
Yes.
I mean, when we come up with a new drug or a new procedure, we generally try it out on lower forms first.
It is possible that something like that happened way back when, back in the last quarter of the 19th century or maybe the first quarter of the 20th century. It's possible that my guess is that when they first got here, now we're talking about the abduction phenomenon again.
Right.
When they first got here.
I'll tell you what, hold your thought or we'll never complete it on this side of the news. So we're going to do our break, our news and what have you. Then we'll come back with Dr. Jacobs. And I'm telling you, what you're going to hear unwound tonight is going to scare the tar out of you. It really will, because it did me. That's why Dr. Jacobs is back here tonight. I'm Art Bell.
This is Midnight in the Desert. To call the show, if you're east of midnight, call 1-952-CALL ART. If you're west of midnight, call 1-952-225-5278.
Those are the numbers.
Oh, now that is fucking funny. For anybody who remembers the old Coast to Coast AM, his original show, the phone numbers used to break down east of the Rockies, west of the Rockies. So that's actually a good throwback. All right, back to Art.
My guest is Dr. David Jacobs. His subject is alien experimentation on humans. And here he is again. All right, doctor, proceed, please.
Oh, well, let's see now. Gosh, what was I saying? I lost my thread of thought, which of course I do on a daily basis. Actually on an hourly basis.
That's quite all right. Let's move as quickly as we can toward this because there's so much. When do abductions typically begin?
Well, actually, just remember what I was going to say before.
Yes.
When these aliens first came here early on, they had to do some sort of study, even when they came here or from afar,
Exactly.
to figure out that the life forms on this planet were amenable to them.
Exactly.
So that had to be done, and I would imagine, and it could have been done from afar too, for all I know. So they knew what they were doing by the time they showed up, or at least after they showed up. They pretty much had the routine down. They knew what they're going to do. They knew that this planet was suitable for them. They knew that life forms were suitable for them. Everything was suitable.
Well, I absolutely guarantee you, if I opened the line for abductees, I'd be flooded with people claiming to have been abducted. Now,
right.
I'm sure some of them are real, and I'm sure some of them are perhaps fabrications. I don't know, but the people sound very earnest and very honest, and not as though they're kidding around at all. So that's just my observation.
Generally speaking, when people say that they've been abducted, the chances are that they have been abducted. Now, that's not everybody, obviously, and you have to be very careful here. And there are people who are, shall we say, not completely in command of their abilities to think properly, and so it can be difficult. But actually, most people don't make those kinds of claims unless they pretty much truly believe it, because
right.
they are such outlandish claims.
They are actually many times even embarrassing. Let's move on. When people are abducted, they describe frequently lying on a table.
Right.
Why?
Well, table procedures are an extremely important part of the abduction phenomenon.
Right.
They're given what we call an examination. Whether this is an examination or not, we don't know. But they're put on, their clothes are removed, they're taken into a room, there's a table there, they get up on the table. It is not like a table that normally we would consider a table with four legs and all that. But then there's a series of procedures that are administered to them that are both mental and physical procedures. We do not know what any of the technologically based procedures are. They use instruments, they use various kinds of contraptions and this and that. We have no knowledge of what these things do at all, which is a very interesting idea because, as I've said before, the abduction phenomenon is unlike the UFO phenomenon in that with UFOs you can be mistaken in what you see, but with abductions it's black or white. It's you're abducted or it's mental. It's physical or it's mental. And if this were mental, people would simply make up what these contraptions are, what these technological machines are doing to them. They would just do that.
All right. Well, once again, we come to the proof part, Doctor, and perhaps here we can give people a little bit of proof. Are there similarities in the procedures that people describe that they have gone through? Yes?
Oh, absolutely. If there weren't similarities, we wouldn't be talking. They're all not only similarities, they're precisely detailed similaritions about specific instruments and things like that I've heard 100 times. Nobody has the slightest idea what they are, and nobody outside of me and other UFO researchers have ever heard anything like that. And so it's a procedure. It's procedures that are both physical and mental as well. In other words, one time I was working with a woman, and she was a young girl at the time, and stop me if I've said this before, and she said that this being was staring at her, and I said, well, what is he looking at your head or something? And he said, or your body, you know. She said, no, he's looking at my eyes. He's looking at my eyes. I said, well, how far away is he from you? And she said, well, his forehead is touching mine.
Wow.
And I said, well, can you close your eyes? She said, no. And I said, well, can you avert your eyes? You know, go left, right, left, right, left, right. She said, no. And I had absolutely no idea what that was.
Very interesting. I mean, if you think about our vision, if we were forehead to forehead, Doctor, I couldn't make out details of you at all.
Right. I did figure it out to the best of my abilities, which may be totally and completely wrong, but I did figure it out eventually. What they're doing there, their eyesight is not exactly the same as ours. They have a different properties, but they're hooking into the optic nerve, which is the only nerve that can be seen from the outside, from what people tell me, and using it as a conduit to energize any other neural pathways in the brain that they want. So the correct question to ask people when this happens is, what's going on in your mind doing this? And they'll say things, well, let's see, I'm seeing a tabletop, I'm seeing a pencil, I'm seeing a dog, I'm seeing a painting, and all these disconnected objects, as you can see that they're just going through memories in some way that are flashing, you know, one after another. Like somebody said, somebody was like they were thumbing through a deck of cards or something, and they were seeing what this person did in the last few weeks and all that. And then there's other things. Well, first of all, I've also had people describe to me different sensations in their body as these people are inside their minds. You can tell that they're going to different spaces, innervating nerve endings in the spine and this and that. But there's something else that goes on here too, unfortunately, and that is that they can, in fact, stimulate sexual response.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, through the eyes, of all things. And
through the eyes, really?
Yeah, through the eyes. This is all done while staring.
Oh, gee, I wish they could pass that talent.
But what this is an egg-taking phenomenon. This is not... whereas when I wrote my first book on The Secret Life, I thought that they were extremely interested in sexuality and all that, the human sexual response. They have no interest in that whatsoever. now that I've learned more, and but it's all about facilitating the taking of ova from women, and how that relates, I do not know.
And sperm from men as well, correct?
Take sperm from men all the time. Take eggs from women all the time. That's all table stuff. That's table procedures. People are never abducted just for table procedures. Well, I shouldn't say never. Most of the time, people are not abducted for table procedures.
All right, and again, there is a chain here. In terms of abductions, they frequently begin early in life, or dad had one and now I'm having one, and they continue through life and then even through generations. But if what you're saying now about sperm and eggs is true, that would make sense, because they would be tracking and observing their product, their work.
I suppose, but they're taking those sperm and eggs, they're fertilizing them, adding something to them. Maybe it's DNA from aliens, maybe it isn't, I don't know, but they are altering that zygote. They place it back in the woman, and the woman then feels pregnant, is pregnant, and then after a couple of months, the little tiny embryo that is there is removed.
All right, hold on for 1 second, Doctor. I want to read you and everybody something. This came from a nurse who we are in discussions with now, and for reasons that will be obvious, she wants to remain and will remain anonymous, as will the patient in this case. But I'm beginning to get more of these. This one stands out. Hi, Art. I just wanted to tell you about a patient I recently had in the ER. It was a young mother who had already presented twice previously since confirming pregnancy 10 weeks ago. On those visits, she said she felt uneasy about her pregnancy and was concerned for the baby's well-being. Each time, we did blood work and an ultrasound to confirm that everything was as it should be. On the third visit, she presented to ER stating that she just didn't feel pregnant. And could we please ensure that all things were okay? Upon obtaining blood work, her HCG levels were those of a non-pregnant woman. Her pelvic ultrasound revealed no fetus, no evidence of a recent pregnancy. We knew this was not correct because we had recent ultrasounds showing a live single fetus within the uterine cavity. This time, there was no fetus present. The patient did not report any signs or symptoms of a miscarriage, just simply quit feeling pregnant. She was apprehensive about this pregnancy right from the start, and now the pregnancy had vanished. To a documented and photographed via ultrasound fetus was now missing, no sign of it or where it went. I couldn't help but immediately think of your guest talking about the hybrids, hybrids. Could this be a case of a pregnancy that was removed from the mother, as your guest had suggested? She sounded eerily familiar. So I got that. When I got it, I called Dr. Jacobs right away, and I said, oh, my God, listen to this. And he said, I've heard it a million times. Right, Doctor?
That is correct. That is correct. This is standard. Once they take that altered embryo and put it into the woman's uterus or wherever they're going to put it, they also place it in other areas. That woman will have it removed at around 9 to 12 weeks, and this happens to most women who have ova. And if they've had an oophorectomy, if they've had their ova removed, then other things are done to them. I mean, they still use them for incubation and for other things. So it doesn't get them out of the woods, so to speak. But this is extremely common. Bud Hopkins first began to study this years and years and years ago, decades ago, and what they're doing here is they are, I'm going to use probably the correct word here, manufacturing hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
They put these little embryos into tanks and gestate them in tanks. And eventually they are removed, and then the woman is required to hold them from time to time, feed them from time to time. We're not sure whether they're the same babies that they took out of her.
You know, I have heard these stories, Doctor, from women directly. In the interviews that I've done over the years, I've heard these stories. I've even heard women tell me that they were reintroduced to a child they once had. When the child is 3 or 4, they're abducted and actually shown the child. I have no idea why or what it means, but I've heard about that.
Yes, I've heard about that too, but we can't guarantee that is actually their child.
I guess not. And in some ways, it's not.
Right. I would assume it's probably not, because I don't know if they keep records. We don't have any evidence of them writing things down anywhere. There are people sometimes who seem to be looking at a clipboard, but a writing.
No, they may have moved past the pencil.
They might have moved past holding something in their hands, for all we know.
That's right.
But the thing is, though, that we don't know how they differentiate between any of the maybe sometimes hundreds of fetuses, babies that they have floating in gestational tanks, waiting to be taken out. This is a tanks with nutritional material in it, to keep the babies alive, so to speak. And they're fed through skin absorption, essentially.
Okay, and these babies, you call them what?
Well, these are all hybrid babies. These are a mixture of alien and human, and so there are different types of hybrids. Ones who look really, really quite alien, but then again not. And when I say alien, I'm using gray aliens as the standard, although they are not the brains behind the whole enterprise. But the gray aliens, everybody knows, everybody loves, and so that's essentially, I think, what's happening with them. But I can't be absolutely sure.
I'm not so sure everybody loves the gray aliens.
Well,
they know about them.
Advertising agencies do, I think. So.
Oh, that's true.
There are ones who, and there's a gradation of children who look really quite grayish, so to speak, and ones who look really quite human. And then there are some who look absolutely human. But there aren't some that look absolutely like gray aliens.
All right. Do these hybrids get returned to Earth despite how they may look?
No. If they're going to be taken to Earth to live here, they must look absolutely human with no distinguishing characteristics whatsoever that would suggest otherwise.
All right, but those are brought back.
Those in recent years are being brought back to live here, yes. Though I never thought I would say something like that ever in my life, but there it is. And that appears to be true. That's my last book, my latest book is all about that. And so yes, even now, even after I've done a bunch of interviews about this, it still sticks in my throat a little bit to have to say that.
I understand. What do you imagine, or have you heard, or do you know happens to those that look a little too alien to be returned? I wonder what becomes of them.
Right. The ones who are, for example, what I call early stage hybrids who look really alien. They have very, very dark black eyes, but there are whites in the eyes, little bits of whites on either side. They have a little mouth, but it's an actual mouth.
Lord, hold on, Doctor. I don't know where that hour went. You all don't want to go away. Trust me on this. You don't want to go away. Professor David Jacobs is my guest. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay right where you are.
Again, we're muted just for the music. As soon as the music completes, we'll go back to the interview. So I believe we still have a little bit of time in our episode.
On the wild side of midnight, from the kingdom of Nye, this is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL-ART.
So my guest is Dr. David Jacobs. He's back again. We're talking about abductions. We're talking about humans who have been taken, and sexual things have been done to them. Not sexual in the terms of sexy sexual. Sperm taken from men, ova from women, eggs, and they're doing something with them. They're creating hybrids, and some of those hybrids are being returned to Earth. The ones that look human, the ones that you wouldn't even blink an eye at, are returned to Earth. The others, well, we don't know, right, Professor?
That's right. Although there's pretty good evidence that they simply become members of the workforce.
Wonderful.
In other words, what you're looking at here is not simply aliens examining us, aliens studying us. This is a workforce borrowed and built through human genes and all that, along with alien genes, if they have such things. And everybody on board a UFO, no matter where a UFO is sighted or what a UFO is, and there are exceptions to that, but everybody on board is working towards a goal. In other words, this is not just a study. They're not examining us. They're not trying to figure out what makes us tick or anything like that. And so this is boiled down to a goal-directed, a very carefully thought out and expertly done program, ultimately to build hybrids.
Mm-hmm. You told me a story about a case in which a fetus was removed from a woman about the same way, the same kind of story I told you. You might want to repeat that one here if you're able.
This is a woman. Well, I've got a bunch of these, but I think this is the one where a woman had elected to have the pregnancy terminated. She couldn't be pregnant. She couldn't even have imagined how she was pregnant, but she was. She had it confirmed and all the rest of that. And she elected for a termination. And if this is the story that I told you, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on the table, and the doctor was there, and he started the procedure. And he said, and he got astonished. He said, well, there's no fetus here. There's no. And the nurse who was standing there looked at him and put her finger to her lips and said, "Shh." And the woman who was on the table said, "Huh? What are you talking about?" He answered about it. And they put her back down, and they continued through the now mock termination procedure, because my guess is that everything was a matter of liability at that time, and because they had already told her she was pregnant, and here she is not pregnant. But she didn't know it. There was no expulsion there was no blood that was there. There was no cramping. There was nothing like that. Now, I'm not a gynecologist, and I would assume that some gynecologists would say, well, sometimes it happens that way, and it might be, on the toilet, and the person doesn't even know it. That might be possible.
And I've heard cases of very early term things being absorbed.
It has to be extremely early term, just
right.
A little nodule.
Got it.
Eventually, it becomes a foreign body in the person's a foreign body in the person's body, and they can't absorb it. They have to just expel it.
How would we even possibly know how many cases in America or worldwide of disappearing fetuses, like the story I read from the nurse here, there are? Could we possibly know that even?
I don't know if there are records of that. It'd be interesting to find out. I would like to know that. It happens to all women abductees who have ova ready to be ready. Now, when I say it happens to all of them who have ova, well, they all do, because I've had kids who are as young as 13 or 14 have eggs taken from them. And it's along with all this sexual buildup beforehand and everything, for some of them, it ruins their lives. They become sexually attached in a strange way to these gray aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And they look for a mate later on who, I had one woman who told me that she saw a guy who was 30 years older than her, or whatever it was, and he was short, he was bald, and he wore big, thick, horn-rimmed glasses. She fell for him. She couldn't control herself, and after she learned about the abduction phenomenon, she realized why. But it was such an odd thing. I mean, she knew it was odd when it was happening, and they got married. and then they lived separately. But the fact was that it was just an uncontrollable impulse in her. But she was an abductee, and that's how it came out. I'm still in contact with her after this story.
All right, let's move through a lot of things fast. How do the abductees describe the way these aliens look?
Well, there's a variety of different aliens on board. There's ones who look insect-like, or insectoids, as I call them in my new book. And they are the ones who are in control. They are the commanders-in-chiefs.
Oh.
They give orders. Everybody else takes orders. They do not come down and do grunt work like taking abductees up to the UFO. They do specialized things. They do some procedures. They will, but they're the ones who everybody obeys, apparently. Off to the side, and I'm going to leave these off to the side, there's a small group of ones who look sort of reptile-like, reptilians or reptilians, as I call them.
Right.
And they do the same procedures that everybody else does for people. I'll talk about them a little bit later if you want. But they are huge on the internet and not huge with abductees.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's gray aliens who come in two types, tall and small. The taller ones do more of the table procedures and that are more complex. The small ones chauffeur people around from room to room. They come down and they get abductees, bring them back on board. They help them get their clothes on. They help them get their clothes off. They're major figures in this because they will do some procedures themselves, but they have their place.
All right.
Then there's a whole range of hybrids who are also in the same business of doing everything that the gray beings do.
Right.
Early stage, middle stage, late stage,
Right.
human stage.
All right. So what I was going to ask is, do you know offhand which species, if we can talk about them that way, we are getting our DNA mixed up with up there? Any clue?
I can't absolutely tell you that. We don't know. And here's the problem. We don't know the backstory. We don't know where they are putting the egg and the sperm together and altering it in some way. We don't. It's got to be done in an assembly line fashion because this goes on night and day, 24/7. Taking eggs and sperm and all the rest of that. This is just constant. And so there has to be an assembly line type of situation with gray aliens or insectoids or reptilians or whatever it is somewhere else, but not in the confines where people are. So Bart Hopkins had one person who said that she saw one of these assembly line type things where they were diddling with the eggs and the sperm. But that's only one person saying that, and you need more than one to have some sort of reality to it.
Sure.
You could have dreamed that or something,
Sure.
So we don't know anything that goes on backstage. Oddly enough, even with people who've had long events, 3 days, 5 days, there's very little backstage that we know. Sometimes we'll know a little bit more, but really very little. So it's everything is as it should be.
All right, here's a question for you. At what age, generally, Doctor, are these hybrids, the ones that can be returned to Earth because they look enough like us? At what point are they returned to Earth?
Right. Well, the word "returned" is probably not right. It's set loose on Earth, is what it is. They're settling down on Earth. They still live in the UFOs up until they live here. The ages starts around 17, 18. Now, it's impossible to tell because, number one, they do not know their own ages because they are not born. They are just taken out of a gestation tank. And age means nothing up there. They don't have birthdays. They don't celebrate ages. So if they think about it, they my guess is between the age of around 17 and 23.
Okay, and they've been virtually in tanks until that point, or at some point do they come out of the tanks? Do they go through some sort of oh God, I don't know what the right word is, briefing procedure? I mean, they've got to be told something about Earth.
Right. Well, we've never seen them actually taken out of tanks, but we see them in various areas of growth. In other words, we see little tiny fetuses, we see them larger and larger and larger, and then people will say it looks like a baby that's floating in there, you know, and then they're removed, and I don't know exactly what time. Once again, we don't know the backstory, and they then have a society that they live in on the UFO, and they learn things about Earth. Even the ones who are not going to be here, to live here, learn things about Earth for reasons that I do not know. And some of them might become part of the workforce as well. And we don't know what happens to all the rest of them who don't measure up to being perfectly normal. We don't know whether they're jettisoned into deep space or they're used for food or whatever they're used for. We don't know that.
I hope not food.
So do I.
So they are returned to Earth in increasingly large numbers. And then when they get to Earth, they cannot just simply function because we are actually a pretty complicated society. And if you haven't lived in it, unless you've lived in an awfully good assimilation of it, you can't function, right, when you get here. So
that is correct. Now, once again, I can't speak for everything that's happening in India, where you have tremendous numbers of people walking around all the time.
Oh, yes.
But in America, it's a very complex society. They learn as much as they possibly can learn from abductees on board the UFO before they get ready to come down. However, the amount that they learn from abductees is minuscule, infinitesimal compared to what they are required to know when they finally get here. In other words, having to wait for a red light to cross the street, or how you what a bottle of Coke is, or a can of Coke, and how do you open the can, and what does it taste like, and these things you can only learn if you're here. Because they don't usually take foodstuffs and things like that on board the UFO. So they have the abductees then take over teaching them when they're here as well, and go with them to different places to teach them what a supermarket is, or what a doctor's office is like, or what a doctor is. And every single thing that they don't have on UFOs, which is almost everything, they have to learn just like they dropped out of the sky from Mars.
Right. And you say it's abductees that teach them.
Abductees teach them. Aliens aren't going to teach them because the aliens don't know either. So their job is not to know. Their job, the gray aliens, for example, is to just do the tasks that they were bred for, that they were made for. They're single-minded. They have no other function than that, and that's what they do.
All right. You use two terms, hybrids and hybrids, right?
In my latest book called Walking Among Us, which the title describes exactly what's happening, I guess, I say that the ones who are walking among us, who are actually here, who are living here, I call them hybrids because just to differentiate from hybrids, actually they're hybrids. Actually, they're aliens.
Yeah.
They're all aliens in a way, and but the hybrids are so human-looking that you cannot differentiate, and therefore, just to make sure that I'm clear about who's who and what's what, I use the word hybrids for the ones who are actually moving in and living here and staying overnight in their apartments, that sort of thing. Now, there is one difference between hybrids and humans. They can control us, and we cannot control them. When on board a UFO, all people, all humans are under control for most of the time. Every once in a while, somebody breaks loose and runs down the hallway and all that. But it's unusual, and most of the time, they're under tight control neurologically. Everybody who speaks on the UFO speaks telepathically. There is no sounds. There's no music. There's no patter of people talking. There's no nothing. It's just sort of silent with people shuffling along and instruments clanging and this and that.
Yeah, but if they're ever going to get back here and function even in a limited way, they have to learn to talk.
They have to learn to talk. They have to learn what music is. They have to learn what writing is. They have to learn everything. And abductees start teaching them on board the UFO, and then when they come down, oftentimes they come down as a child or two with a hybrid caretaker with them, an older caretaker, and they learn about what a kitchen is, and what a refrigerator is, and what a computer is, and what a television is, and what a rug is.
All right. Here's something I want to observe. I have talked to many abductees in my years, and many times, Doctor, there's a physical altercation of some sort. And while we might imagine because they're aliens, they're super strong, fact is, they're really not. And I've talked to people who have pushed the aliens, have punched the aliens, and have otherwise physically assaulted them, and they usually are described as lightweight, not physical at all, and usually can't take a punch.
Yeah, I've had that also. I've had have them push them, and had one grab one by the throat. I had one pull. She was being walked down a hallway with her arms up. They were holding onto her elbows. Two aliens, and she got one elbow loose, and then just brought it forward, and then flipped it back and hit this gray alien in the eye with her elbow, and a white substance came out.
Right.
And they hustled her away, and they said she shouldn't do that. That was bad. That was not good. That was bad. And they put her in stirrups, and then they tied her down, so to speak, to a table. And they were very, very upset, and then they went on with their procedures. But that does happen. It does happen from time to time. But these gray aliens weren't built for strength. They were built because they have certain tasks to do that don't require a whole lot of strength.
Well, I've got a reason for what I said. In other words, if you're going to talk about an invasion, if you're going to talk about a slow but sure invasion of our planet and our species, then, you know, they may have ray guns or who knows what they've got on those ships, but really, they've right now got about 7 billion people, most of them people, I hope, who would fight them and who would cause a lot of trouble for them. We have bombs and missiles and nuclear weapons and a lot more strength physically than they have. So if you want to take over a planet, let's be honest, we're talking here about invasion, this would be the way to do it instead of, you know, the classical Independence Day scenario.
Well, right, exactly. And what you're doing is you're putting down humans, people who look human, who are just average size, average weight, average everything. They might be, ever so slightly naive, but they're humans, and you can't tell. You know, they're doing it in a very intelligent way, and it's taking them a very long time to do it. But that apparently means nothing. Time means nothing. The question then is how long do these beings live? And for gray beings, are they just, you know, they keel over backstage somewhere and they just clone another one and another one, they all look alike. And then there are the insect-like ones, the ones who are calling the shots here. How long do they live? Do they live 10,000 years? Do they live only 500 years? We don't know that. But time apparently means nothing. There's no particular hurry from what I can gather about this.
Apparently not. And again, so that people understand, these hybrids that are returned are in every way that you would see and or hear just like us. One major difference, and that's the difference that I guess would make all the difference, and that is they can control what we think. We were talking about mind control last night, and here's a pretty good example of it. These hybrids have the ability to control what we think. Is that correct, Doctor?
That is correct, and you're putting a light froth on it.
Well, go ahead and put all the icing on you want.
They can make us do whatever they want to make us do. They can make us act in any way they want. They can basically control our functioning, our higher level of functioning and thinking, and they can make us love them and hate them. Whatever it is, they can do it. Now, there are some people who it's much more difficult to do it to. They're resistors. The woman named Karen Morgan, who appeared in all three of my books on abductions, is a resistor from the beginning, and she still resists, but she winds up doing whatever they want anyway. It doesn't matter. But most people are not resistors, and they just go along with whatever is said to them. But the problem is that makes us a second-class species.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. If they can control our thoughts and our actions. Let me ask this. Is there any indication, Doctor, that they are frequently exercising this already? Or do you think when the right moment comes, they begin exercising it in large numbers?
Oh, gosh. Well, that might be the change for all we know, which I haven't talked about yet. But I don't really know. Here's what I do know. All communication is telepathic on board. People are hearing words, they're repeating, they're saying things, and there's back and forths with beings and all that sort of stuff. When they leave, they have totally forgot that they were abducted, and there is no telepathy. Except every once in a while, because these beings who are here are not perfect, an abductee will still be telepathic when they come back. And it fades after about a week, about 7 days or so, and then it's gone. And they can tell what people are thinking in a room, and they don't like it. They hate it. They don't want it to happen that way. They don't want to be around people then. And I've had several cases of that, and one person complained to me, and I said, just wait it out, and it'll fade, and it does. So that happens. That's a mistake.
All right, what is, I have people calling the show all the time telling me they feel like a singularity is coming, a great change. You used the phrase, the change. What do you mean by that, please?
Years ago, people were describing how these aliens were saying that soon there's going to be a change. Change is coming soon. Soon everybody's going to be happy. Soon everybody would know their place. Soon it's going to be wonderful, etc. And so, as I think I mentioned to you before, I asked them what they meant by the change, if they knew, and nobody knew.
Well, I'm told all the time that's when get Windows 10, and then I'll be happy and all will be well. My computer tells me that every day.
That just happened to me last week, actually, so I have experienced the change.
Yeah.
Then I asked them what soon meant, because if time means nothing, soon might mean in 10,000 years, or it might mean in 10 minutes, for all we know.
Of course, yes.
Nobody knew the answer to that either.
But it is your contention that this taking of that which is most precious to us, our youngsters, in the womb, is going on massively, and it's an ongoing thing, and these humans are being replaced by hybrids who can control us. So if that isn't an invasion, I don't know what is, and that's why when you got on here the first time and talked about it, I finally said, well, my God, you're talking about an invasion, and I think you said it, I didn't.
That's right, and it is that. It really is that. This is an existential threat. This is a threat to all humanity. It's a global phenomenon. It's not just us here in the United States. And people, you can't imagine how many emails I get from people from around the world filling out a questionnaire that I have on my website talking about all these unusual things that have happened that don't happen to non-abductees. And the numbers that are out there in terms of how many people are abductees is enormous. It's a small percentage of the population. Bud Hopkins and I, figured out it was 2% through the Roper polls, asking questions about certain questions that they which would indicate that they were abductees. But they used 6,000 people to answer these questions. The plus minus on this for error rate was only 1.4%, which is very, very, very low. And we figured out, after cooking the numbers down so that they were more realistic, we figured out that about 2% of the American people were abductees. Well, 2% of 330 million is one hell of a lot of people.
Yes, it is. And what bothers me is, we're taking a break here, Doctor, that, when it gets right down to it, there'll only be the change. No fight, just a change. I'm going to want to fight, I think.
All right, with that, we will leave Midnight in the Desert for this evening. We will, of course, pick up the interview tomorrow with Dr. David Jacobs and Art Bell's belief of alien invasion. With us tomorrow night as we fight in Dominion with our Midnight in the Desert interview. With that, though, we're about to call it a day and pack it in Dominion for day number 28. Day 29, of course, comes out tomorrow as we approach the New Year's in just a few days from now. So until later, again, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Get us to those goals of 5,000 views so Boxy will pay attention to us over at Nexters. 1,000 subscribers so YouTube will pay attention. Both of them will start sending us items once we do hit those goals. And we will be sending 100% of those to you, the folks who watch and listen to the show. Of course, to get some free crypto, go to coinbase.com/join/cparsley. Get $10 free, and still until the end of the year, you can get a hold of their $1 million Christmas promotion for signing up. And of course, Coinbase Earn, where you take less than 2-minute lessons, actually. And then you do a 1-question little test at the end of each category to get free crypto. There is no requirement that you actually have to keep it for any particular time, so you can take it immediately after answering the question and send it here to Nexters on Dominion to get anything you want, from Valkyrie's Favor to crypto to diamonds to anything your heart would desire. And again, we'll be back tomorrow for our regular 3 parts, 1, 2, and 3, of course, as normal, with the interview finishing tomorrow night with Midnight in the Desert. So, with the new world here and the Krakens back in the original server, have a great night. May all your fights win. May you get anything you need for your heroes. And always remember, release the Kraken.